I'm Greg Borowski, and we're joined now by Dan Bice, our Watchdog columnist, to talk about winners and losers from Tuesday night's elections. And these aren't necessarily your ordinary winners and losers. We're not just talking about who's ahead in the polls.
I generally try to avoid naming people who are on the ballot because everybody knows who those winners and losers are, unless there's an exceptional situation.
All right, and so here your first winner you have are the incumbents at the local level.
The Milwaukee County and city incumbents. There's all this talk about the anti-incumbency fervor around the country. In fact, here, every incumbent for the Milwaukee County and City was reelected except for Alderman Puente and two Walker appointees to the bench. Everybody else, I mean, Tom Barrett ends up getting 70% of the vote, and Chris Abley ends up winning by 12%.
Is that just because it's hard to unseat an incumbent, or was there something about just overblown claims that these challengers were going to do well?
I think in Milwaukee, you had a huge turnout for Hillary Clinton, who is an establishment person. Plus, I think that, we'll touch on this in a minute, some of the issues just didn't resonate with voters in terms of why we needed to remove the people who were there.
All right. Now, one of your losers is Bob Donovan. We know he lost big in the mayor's race. He did hang on to his aldermanic seat, but why do you have him down as a loser?
You know, he ended up performing worse in the general election in both races, even though he had fewer candidates that he was running against. He got 31% of the vote in the primary against Barrett and Davis. In the primary, he ends up with 30%, which is about as low as you can go for a major candidate in a mayoral race. And in his own aldermanic race, he just barely hung on to that against a political newcomer, and he's walking away with fewer votes than any other person on the Common Council.
All right, on the winner side, you've got Governor Scott Walker, who is not on the ballot, but seemed to be in everybody's election mailer and TV ad.
Yeah, everybody wanted to associate, but the fact is, you know, he came on and he endorsed Ted Cruz. I was told by one of his allies, supporters, insiders, that about 10 days before his endorsement, he was thinking whether it was important or not. But he did endorse, and I think it had an impact, but I think equally important was the attacks that Donald Trump had on him. And last Friday night at the fish fry, in which all the GOP leaders were there, people again and again and again kept on mentioning how upset they were by Donald Trump making these attacks. It wasn't so much that they disagreed with his criticisms. It was more that an outsider was coming in.
And he's our guy.
He is our guy, and we went through Act 10 with him. Yeah. You weren't here. You shouldn't have been. You shouldn't be saying this stuff.
On the loser side, and speaking of the fish fry and other appearances, Sarah Palin, who was as a surrogate for Donald Trump,
which was a complete and utter disaster. It was 19 minutes long. She got applause, I believe, twice. Once she made a mention of the green and gold. I don't count that because anybody who mentions the Packers,
that's just gratuitous.
Right. And then she got one applause line in the speech, and then she got an applause line when she thanked the people for letting her to intervene. And it's still actually resonating how bad this speech is. Yesterday on Morning Joe, they were asking if this was a case of, quote, bad acid or whatever. And in fact, I think she knows how bad it was, because when she left the stage, NBC asked her how it went, and she basically said, "At least I didn't get booed."
That's a pretty low bar. All right, on your winner list, you've got the Milwaukee streetcar, or as the opponents called it, the Milwaukee trolley.
Which I make a point of that. You know, it's hard to find people who fully embrace the streetcar. You know, the opponents called it a trolley. Mark Belling loses his voice screeching about the thing. Polls show that only about a third of Milwaukee city residents support it, but the candidates who made this their key issue didn't do so well. And in particular, Chris Wyken, who was taking on Terry Witkowski, he made it a big issue for him, and he ends up with only 47% of the vote, ends up losing.
And finally, let's get one more of your losers, Craig Peterson, who was part of this shadowy behind-the-scenes group trying to influence city and local elections. How did he do with his candidates?
He's the River Hills Republican consultant who's leading the group called Milwaukeeans for Better Governance. I believe all of his challengers ended up losing. He had a couple of incumbency supporters, including Mark Borowski, who won. He told me last night that he had a couple other candidates that we didn't know about that actually did really well.
So these are the double secret probation candidates.
But that's the problem with his organization right now. So much of it's secret, we don't know exactly what's happening.
All right, so you can read more about Dan's winners and loser picks at jsonline.com.